Yo, let's get away from the whiteboard for a minute. But Latin 3, we still got stuff to talk about, so let's do it. Because while we were reading, we did in fact see a thing that we haven't talked about yet, as often happens in Ecce Romani, and it's going to be a few chapters before they talk about it. So I thought, why not just make a video now and broach this topic, because there is a thing that we need to get into, and it's the relative clause of characteristic. If you didn't hear me, I'm talking about this right here, the relative clause of characteristic, all right? And you might be thinking, oh no, why would there be such a thing as the relative clause of characteristic? Well, don't panic. It's not the worst thing. It is still, in fact, a relative clause, but what's different about it is that it's a relative clause that takes a subjunctive, right? Because the thing about relative clauses is that they actually aren't that complicated, right? I mean, that's why we had them back in Latin 1, right? Back in Latin 1, we had relative clauses all the time, and we didn't even talk about them because they were so simple that we didn't need to. You didn't need special grammar. We didn't even mention the word relative clause until Latin 2 when we started seeing the relative pronoun in different cases, right? You would just see like qui, quae, or quod, and a verb. Done, right? Not complicated at all. In Latin 2, we talked about them because we found out how you can use the different cases, blah, blah, blah. But even then, it was still a relative pronoun plus a verb. But sometimes that verb is going to be subjunctive, and there is a difference in what is meant if a subjunctive is used versus an indicative, all right? The relative characteristic is not describing, something that whatever noun you're describing has actually done or does do, but something that they would do or might do, because the clause of characteristic is describing a type. Let me give you an example. All right, so here's an example of a sentence with a relative clause in it. It says, have you found Luke, a cat who hides himself on the refrigerator? He does do that. He likes to sit up on top of the refrigerator and knock stuff down from there. We can't even keep things up there anymore. Right? This is not a relative characteristic. You can see in here a relative pronoun, right? But my verb is a good old indicative verb. That's because I'm describing something that Luke actually does. He does, in fact, hide himself up on top of the refrigerator. So have you found Luke, the cat who hides on the refrigerator? Totally within the realm of actual fact stuff, so we use an indicative. On the other hand, this sentence says, have you found Leia, a cat who would eat small animals? And you notice we have our relative pronoun again, so it is a relative clause, but it's a relative characteristic because Adamos is subjunctive. It's not indicative. And the reason why I use this is I'm not describing her as a cat who actually eats small animals. I'm just saying she's a cat who would eat small animals. She's the kind of cat to eat small animals because she is a fierce huntress. Now, so far she has hunted a single cricket and a bunch of decorations that are on the wall, but she is fierce. And so I'm not describing her as somebody who's actually eaten the small animals because she hasn't been eating small animals, but she would. She is that type of cat. All right? To give you another example, if you need another one, let's take this, right? So this says, I said, Dixie, I said, that I am a man who would play with dogs, right? I'm not saying that I do play with dogs. I actually love playing with dogs, but I don't have a dog right now, so that's not something that actually happens to me very much. I am, however, the kind of guy who would love playing with dogs because I'm very much a dog person. So I've got my relative pronoun here to describe me, and then I've got play in the subjunctive because I am the kind of guy who would love to play with dogs, right? And here I used it in the imperfect because I put this sentence in the past, just, to see a good secondary sequence example. I am the kind of guy who would play with dogs, right? But I don't play with dogs right now because I have cats, and so I play with my cats instead. And you have to be careful when you play with cats because they have claws, like in this example here, which is in fact not a characteristic, but another good old relative clause, like the kind that we know from before. I am in pain in my feet, or I am suffering in my feet, which the cats bite. And again, I've got my relative pronoun here, quos, describing the feet, which, but it's not a characteristic. This is something that actually happens. Those cats bite my feet. Oh, and it hurts so much. Luckily, their teeth are tiny, so it's real easy to recover from those incredible wounds on my feet. Anyway, So that's what I'm talking about when I say a relative clause of characteristic. You're describing like a type or a potential, and you can even see a connection here to sort of the difference that I talked about in the last video, cum temporal versus cum circumstantial. One of them is a thing that happens at a time when it literally happened. The other one is a time whenever it happens, right? So there's kind of a connection there in the sense that the subjunctive is in part about the potentiality of a thing as opposed to the like concreteness of a thing. And that's a topic that we'll come back to in a later video also on subjunctives. So in the meantime, though, just take away the fact that relative clauses of characteristic are for describing types instead of actual facts. All right? I will see you guys, I guess, tomorrow. Bye.